Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, what the hell is it? It's Tuesday. That's all you really need to know. Tuesday is Joan McCarter Day, so what else do you want to know? The date? Fine, sure. What difference does it make? I'll tell you. I'm not hiding anything. Okay, I am. I don't know what the date is. It is December 28th. I'm looking up so I can get the December 28th, 2021. At this point in the year, dates don't matter a great deal. It's either Christmas or New Year's or something else, and it doesn't really matter. And pretty soon, it won't matter what the date is because you're going to write it wrong if you still write checks anyway. So, I stopped paying attention to these things. Also, I stopped sleeping and eating regularly. So, it's become a little bit difficult to tell what's going on time-wise. But I have this alarm set, and I get up, and I'm disoriented because the kids aren't going to school, which is fine because it gives me more time to waste dawdling when I'm getting ready for the show, and makes me that much more disoriented once I sit down when the final alarm goes off. So, okay, let's see. We have plenty to catch up on today. There was at least one story that I saw just after the show ended yesterday that I was just terribly sorry we didn't have on hand for yesterday's discussion. And I think you must already know what that is. The question is, what did I put in pocket with respect to, retelling this story? Okay. So I have at least a couple of things here. And fans of the show, if you're fan enough, get it? If you're fan enough of the show, you would have been following, of course, regularly following the KITM hashtag. And so you probably have some inkling of what's coming up. Story-wise. Oh, but look, I have news, a couple of things that I have to catch up on. One, of course, the Bill's morning tweet, which is always a good way to start and probably good for orientation if you're, wandering around unsure of what to do for the day. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. That's good for me to know, at any rate. Kagro X reminds you that the Senate has 3 days left if they want to do something with the filibuster in 2021. Right, true. It was in this morning's post. Everybody hold your breath, starting right. I was going to say, the tweet goes on to say right now, but I say don't do it because you'll die. Because if you're holding your breath waiting for a filibuster change, it could still take a while. No real particular reason why they would accomplish this in 2021. It would have been nice. Would have gotten some things done. You can accomplish it in 2022 and still get some things done. I don't know why anybody would wait, but they did, and no indication that they're going to be doing any serious work on something like that in between now and the new year. But it was a thing to talk about. I say was a thing to talk about. It's still a thing to talk about. It was going to be a thing to talk about with Joan, but I don't think that we'll be hearing from her today. Just I don't want to disclose anything here, but just minor disruption in her morning schedule as well. I hope it's a minor disruption. I hope it remains a minor disruption. And, it's taken her away from the computer, and probably you're not hearing from her on Daily Kos either. So, we all lose in this one. But I have a pretty good idea of what we might have talked about, what I would have brought up anyway. And, there's this whole written record of what she's been thinking about because she shares all of that with you at Daily Kos. So we could always comb through the most recent stories, unless, of course, this thing took her away from the keyboard yesterday as well, but I think looks like it's going to be all right. Anyway, it's going to be fine. Thanks, Joan. No big deal. You know how we handle these things on this show, and we just roll with it. And sometimes we don't even know what the hell's going on or what day it is, and then you call and say, "Oh yeah, it's Tuesday again." No, well, actually, I think we almost always anticipate the call, but things happen. Greg's generator, conks out, what have you. We'll be good. Hopefully you will too. Hope all goes smoothly. I know it's an annoyance when something goes wrong in the morning. It's an annoyance when something goes wrong at any time. But in the morning, I don't know, somehow very disruptive. But, okay, we can make the switch. You those of you listening at home, if you monitor the KITM hashtag, you should get a hobby, for one thing, a different one. But this one's mine. You can't have it. But you can, of course, use it in the morning to suggest stories. So right after the show yesterday, the suggestion was that we might, perhaps find it interesting and advantageous to take up the latest story on Madison Cawthorn, who's a bit of a jerk, so it makes it kind of fun to report this sad story, as we reported the other day. He is, of course, getting divorced. And I think we made note of that. In light of the fact that he had just spoken to the crowd at one of the, I guess it was the Turning Point USA conference, which I have difficulty, separating in my mind. There's no real difference between that and, say, CPAC. It's just, I guess, a younger crowd because they're supposed to be college kids at this place. But whatever. I mean, Charlie Kirk is like, 40 years old at this point, but still pretending he's like a college Republican guy. At any rate, the issue was he was getting divorced. He'd only been married for 8 months, which is, something of a surprise, let's say, that it would end so quickly. But he does look to be a bit young. Quite honestly, I was surprised to learn that he was married in the first place. Young and busy. He's not doing any work in Congress, but, he's traveling around doing things, if not actually legislating. You'll recall that Madison Cawthorn is the one who said that he didn't really bother hiring a legislative staff. He hired a communications staff because that's chiefly what he was there to do, messaging. And as you'll recall, they put together such brilliant hits as the video of the boss punching a tree, him misquoting or using fake quotes from all sorts of historical figures, and then, of course, videos of every time he speaks, which is pretty stupid because he's not very bright. He's not a smart guy, and he's not very well spoken. Anyway, he had just most recently given a short speech to the Turning Point USA crowd, during which he encouraged them to do such radical things as get married early and have as many kids as possible. He has no kids, and he did get married rather early, but he also got divorced early, which is important to get a jump on things. I think it's good that he gets started early on things. It's an early riser, this Madison Cawthorn, I think. I mean, he could be getting married and divorced in the afternoon. I'm not really sure, but I like the fact that he started in on this project very quickly. He also said, by the way, that everybody should drop out of college. Unless you are planning to become a doctor or a lawyer or one of the smart things, I guess, in his mind, you should drop out of college. He himself is a college dropout, which I think is probably a generous reading of what happened to him, his experience in college, in the sense that I think they were dropping him out, basically, but he did them a favor and dropped out first. I think. I don't think they expel you from places where you'll pay, but they can give you very strong hints that it's not worth your money. And it wasn't worth his money. He was in Patrick Henry University, college. I don't know what their status is. It's here in Virginia, and it's billed as a college for those who were homeschooled up until the end of their secondary education in high school, which it must be a real challenge. Running a college for anybody is a difficult thing. Not only, of course, all the academics and the teaching, but dealing with thousands of relocated, very young students, most of whom have not lived away from home before. But they went to school during the day. And now you're talking about bringing in, I assume, thousands, maybe hundreds. It might be a small place, Patrick Henry College, of kids who not only have probably not left home before, but didn't even leave home to go to school because they were homeschooled. So that seems to me to probably pose some additional challenges. But, if we guess that in the main, kids who are homeschooled are probably, I'm sure some of them I mean, I think the ones who are homeschooled but go on to things other than Patrick Henry College, they can go to a college that's for, regular kids. I mean, I want to use the word normal here, but it's probably fraught with political danger to do so. But that's fine. I think everyone will forgive me. You know what I'm talking about here. But I think that probably kids that go from homeschooling to say, oh, I don't know, what's our usual yardstick for this stuff? Harvard, whatever, UVA, if you want to stay here in Virginia, probably are, among the better adjusted homeschool kids. They might not be, they might have no problems. They, socialization problems, or they might be a little shy or whatever. But I imagine that kids who choose to go to a college for other homeschoolers, I would guess probably the percentages are pretty high in terms of kids who haven't, finished their socialization process, which might make Patrick Henry a great choice. You're with other kids who are in similar situations, and you can change that as you go over 4 years together and have some support in doing it. Or you could fail most of your classes and gain a reputation as a sexual abuser and then exercise your option to leave the institution, as Madison Cawthorn did. But he wanted everybody to know that it was okay. You should do it. And anyway, college is a ripoff. It's a scam, he tells you, unless you're going to become a professional or, I would say, or a member of Congress responsible for legislative policy for the United States of America. I would think you would want to get as much education as you could. And he may have done that. But I mean, finish the education is what I meant by getting as much as you could. But I think he may have had all he could absorb and dropped out. And he wanted everybody to know, see, look at me. It's okay. You can drop out and become a successful, important person. Like all you have to do is your backup plan is just run for Congress and be elected to Congress right away when you're 20, whatever he is. I guess he's got to be at least 25 constitutionally. And then everything will be fine. All you have to do is, like me, declare yourself king of Dumbass Mountain and get everyone to recognize you as the king of Dumbass Mountain and pay you $180,000 to be that king of Dumbass Mountain, and things will be fine. It's a limited, supply of these jobs, but just go do it, essentially, is what he was saying. And, of course, get married early and have lots of kids. Or get married early and have no kids and then get divorced early, which is, where we started this story. So as I mentioned to you, you may have seen in the KITM hashtag the tweet from the irreverent testimony account, which is, I guess, I always don't know who to credit for this. I mean, it's Travis. Travis and Rachel are together, the irreverent duo who put together the Irreverent Testimony podcast, and I'm pretty sure it's Travis is in control of the Twitter feed for it, but I always feel like, well, it's Irreverent duo here. I should not leave Rachel out of this, but okay. I think Travis tweeted this one to me, and you may have seen it on the KITM hashtag. He's anticipating the whole thing here. The stories on KITM this week are going to be lit. There's more to this weird story about Madison Cawthorn, or rather, his marriage. Okay, so, to judge a book by its cover, which you're not supposed to do, I'll start off by saying I did see circulated on Twitter the other day. Where did I? I'll have to look it up. But it was a tweet from, or it was a picture of the now former Mrs. Madison Cawthorn. I guess their divorce isn't quite final yet. But Ron Filipkowski was tweeting this around. She, I guess, took a picture or had someone take a picture of her because it's not a selfie unless it's on a timer or something. Anyway, but so not the traditional selfie, but a picture of her celebrating Christmas, I guess. She's in front of the Christmas tree in their house, her parents. I don't know whether she's left home or not yet. Anyway, the Christmas tree is there. She's having a glass of wine. She's dressed up in, very high heels and a short little dress there. And Ron Filipkowski was tweeting it around saying, hey, Mrs. Cawthorn appears to be dealing with the pain of her separation from Mr. Wonderful quite well tonight. Cheers. Remember, of course, that announcement would have come on Christmas Eve, or perhaps the day before, and reached us on Christmas Eve. So she appears to be doing just fine. And as I said, so this dress she's wearing, it's not a big dress. It's a little revealing. And I guess she is a personal trainer or something along those lines, which we'll learn about in the background story of his marriage. And I just thought, it's an interesting look. I'll say. She's very muscular, so I'm sure she's in very good shape. And, a dress like that isn't ordinarily cut for muscle, we'll say. And she's very fit. She's got gigantic tree trunk legs, It's unusual, I would say. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. But Madison Cawthorn seems like the kind of guy who would be very much into working out, so it makes some sense. And indeed, if you look at the stories that were circulating yesterday, you will find that, as it happens, they met at CrossFit. But there's a kind of an odd tale to how they met at CrossFit. Now, the first thing I saw that gave any indication that it was anything weird, besides my looking at the picture of her and saying, she looks weird, which, isn't a very helpful thing. But okay, was the story circulating on Twitter by Susie Madrick, who wrote up at Crooks and Liars this Fox News question mark of a headline, did Madison Cawthorn marry a Russian honeypot? Oh, dear. So I didn't think initially of, in just the snap judgment of the picture, that she was Russian. I don't think she is Russian. I think she's American. But the story is an odd one. Now, it begins this way with a video of an interview that Cawthorn gave to the Daily Caller. And it starts out just by saying, listen to his story about how he met his wife. And I don't think I can roll the thing, but let's see. It's a minute and 16 seconds. And it's a minute and 16 seconds of boring crap, generally speaking. But it's a real interesting tall tale about how he met his wife. And because it's Daily Caller video, I don't know, maybe they would press with copyright stuff. So anyway, the story he tells, I've now listened to the tape a couple of times, is along these lines. It doesn't start out as a how I met my wife story. I don't think so. I mean, there's no initial question in the clip, so maybe that's what they asked. But at any rate, he goes on to say, well, what he had done was, I guess he and some of his buddies decided that they were going to take a trip of some kind, and I don't know why they were doing it. I don't know if it was like a bachelor party thing or whatever. But as he's describing it, he's going to take this trip, but he has an issue with his doctor that I guess he's going to try, or was going to try, or did try some experimental surgery of some sort. I'm sure stemming from his catastrophic injury in the automobile accident, which left him in a wheelchair. And I guess the doctor wanted to perform thus and such a surgery, and I don't know what the surgery was and what the results of it were supposed to be, but apparently Cawthorn was convinced that there was some chance that if the surgery, I don't know whether if the surgery did work or didn't work, that he wouldn't be able to take such a trip again in the future. To get on an airplane, essentially, was an iffy prospect for him somehow, even though he travels back and forth between North Carolina and D.C., maybe he drives. I don't know. Anyway, so he had said, okay, well, doctor, why don't we wait on this operation until after I take this trip? I want to take one last trip before we do this thing. And apparently the doctor said, okay, you'll be in a lot of pain, though, if you go on this trip. And he said, that's okay, it's worth it to me. So he goes on to describe how he has a great vacation with his buddies, and they go to, well, that's the weird part. He is telling the story, and he's doing just fine. Now, another observer of this story, Peter Stroke, the the former FBI agent who was, of course, targeted by Trump so intently and drove him out of the FBI and tried to, I think initially did and managed to engineer it such that he would lose his pension, but I think it's been restored since then. But at any rate, he brought his, I guess, expertise in interviewing subjects to bear on this, and he noticed that Cawthorn is telling the story. He's very engaged and smiling and looking at the camera and telling his story matter-of-factly. And there's one section, how does he put it? Did I pocket that comment that he made? He says, yeah, I did. Here it is. He says, there's a lot of talk going on about this clip, but there's something here here's something we can all try. Turn your volume down all the way and watch the video below. That is helpful. But when does MC's, Madison Cawthorn's, not member of Congress, but that works too. When does Madison Cawthorn's demeanor change? When does he not have a happy, direct, and engaged look at the camera? It's actually really pronounced. Go watch. And where he fumbles, he's having a fine time telling his story, just relating it as it came. He's talking about where they went on the trip and under what circumstances they did. Well, my buddies and I, we took this great trip. We were near Russia. We went to like Sweden and Norway and other countries, and then we were near there, and so we said, what the hell, let's do it. We jumped on a boat to St. Petersburg and took the boat to St. Petersburg on a whim. We went and we decided to go to, we all took $100 and we went to a casino and said, let's see what happens. Okay. Now the rest of the story comes out from him quite naturally. I don't suspect that there's anything terribly wrong from his perspective about the rest of the story, which is the interesting part, the part of his marriage. But because I've started down this road, I'll tell you that, yeah, Peter Strzok is pointing, of course, to this part. There's this weird thing. Well, where'd you go on this trip? We were very near Russia. Okay, did you go to Russia? Yeah, we did. Okay, well, why didn't you just say we went to Russia? Well, that wasn't where we went initially on the trip. Okay, where'd you go? Near Russia. What's near Russia? We were in Norway and Sweden and other countries near Russia. That's Finland, is the other country near Russia. And he eventually went to other countries that were also near Russia, like apparently Estonia, but that wasn't where he went first. So, odd. Something clearly wrong to him with saying we went to Russia. You know, it might be the fact that he's a Republican congressman. People look at you funny that way. No funnier than they usually look at him, because like his last vacation that he told us anything about was to Hitler's Eagle's Nest. He was very pleased with himself to have knocked the Hitler retreat off of his bucket list, as he tweeted or put on Instagram or whatever social media platform he was using at the time. And this one embarrassed him for some reason too. He hesitated. Anyway, what he does is he goes to St. Petersburg, Russia, and as he says, he and his buddies all said, well, what the hell, we'll go to a casino, we'll take $100, we'll go to this casino, we'll see what happens. And he goes on to relate the rest of the story, which is that he ends up meeting a U.S. Army captain who's originally from Miami. That's the way he put it, originally from Miami. They hit it off and become friends. No word on, how they do at the casino or anything like that. But at any rate, that's not the focus of the story. The focus of the story, I guess, was supposed to be how you met, because it then shifts. And he says, so I'm back at home, and this guy from Miami calls me, and he says, hey, you should come to wherever the hell they were, and come on down for our CrossFit competition. And he says that he told the guy, well, I can't be in a CrossFit competition. I'm in a wheelchair. And the guy says, well, then just come and do the pull-ups part. And I said, okay. And then it's all right. Well, maybe that's the thing that people would do, right? You're living your quiet life in North Carolina, or I guess at this point he's already in Congress. And forget doing all the congressional work. Leave North Carolina. Come to Miami, Florida, to a CrossFit competition. Now, he goes on, again, without much hesitation, to tell everybody, well, it turns out that the whole CrossFit competition thing was a sham. Okay. And it was really just an excuse to get me in the room with, I guess, a friend of his friend, who turned out to be this woman who he eventually marries. And he goes on to say, we hit it off, and now, anyway, long story short, she's my fiance, or we're getting married, or whatever. So another CrossFit enthusiast is there, and it was all just an excuse to set him up with her, which is an odd thing to do with a young, busy member of Congress who you met in a casino in St. Petersburg, which is where other things start to fall apart, like the online sleuths who remind everybody, hey, gambling, generally speaking, is actually illegal in most of Russia. It was outlawed in the early 2000s in St. Petersburg. There isn't a casino in St. Petersburg. No legal casinos, anyway, in St. Petersburg. The nearest one, there are a few legalized casinos around the country and various zones in Russia, and there's one not, terribly far by Russian distances standards from St. Petersburg, but it's 80 miles away. And, you took the boat to St. Petersburg and on a whim and just went to the casino. Now, you can't enter Russia without a visa, for one thing. And it takes, a while, a couple of weeks. They tell you to start getting your visa a couple of weeks ahead of your, if not months, ahead of your trip. It's not easy to do. I mean, you just sign up and go through the paperwork and everything. But it's not quick, and it's not something you ordinarily can get, at the airport. Like you've arrived in Moscow or St. Petersburg and you just say, I forgot my visa. Can I pay for one now? No. So a little bit of a mystery there. Then the mystery of what casino are you talking about? And hey, there's no casinos here. And if it's an illegal underground casino, probably run by Russian mobsters, maybe with the sanction of the state, sure, maybe, fine. What's a U.S. Army captain doing there? Well, I don't know. Unless, of course, it's just not a casino, but a honey trap. Wow.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, yeah, we were wondering a little bit about Madison Cawthorn and his odd circumstances of his meeting his wife, who he's now divorced from under, I guess, relatively odd circumstances, but this can happen. 8 months. I guess sooner is better than later if it's just not going to work, but whatever. I mean, presumably she knew what she was getting into, and I guess not. We presumed that she thought she was getting into, or thought she knew what she was getting into, but apparently didn't, or did, and said the mission's over and it's time for me to leave. I don't know exactly what happened, but thanks to the work of the various internet sleuths, we know that there's a little something wrong with the story. I don't know that that I remember offhand, but maybe reading through some of these threads we'll find where I first heard, oh yeah, well, there's the issue of the visa. But I recall that was the case. I mean, I traveled there too, so, that would become a weird and awkward thing for me in any campaign for Congress, probably. Somebody would say, you went to Russia. You went to Russia when it was the Soviet Union. Or at least Madison Cawthorn can say, I went there when it was a super awesome, manly, masculine, Republican, conservative, COVID-denying kind of thing to do. Except, run by a criminal syndicate and not the issue for me. Anyway, but, Soviet Union, obviously, understandably strict with its visas. especially for Americans, but I don't think they've dropped that. By all reports, it's still the requirement that there be a visa ahead of time for travelers in Russia. And they're a little bit strict. Anyway, let's see. For instance, there is I mentioned the internet sleuths. There's Soy Chica on Twitter, who I think we've called her name out before. She is something of an internet online sleuth. She's very good at figuring out where people are from the terrible online information security standpoint when they text picture or tweet pictures of themselves, usually pictures of them doing something that's supposed to be bad and triggering for liberals, and they're doing so with the anonymity of the internet, they think, protecting them, and she's able to figure out where they are, identify them, etc. So I guess she put her skills to work, if I'm thinking of the right person. I mean, it is Soy Chica, SOYCHICKA on Twitter, who I'm reading right now, and I believe I recall her record correctly. Anyway, she tweets, looks like Madison Cawthorn's random trip, as he put it, random trip to Russia, which is not a thing you can do, and was described elsewhere, not in this video, but elsewhere on his social media, on his friends' social media, as something they just decided to do at the spur of the moment, like, hey, we're close to Russia, but for some reason unwilling to say that we're in Finland. And let's just go there. We'll hop on a boat. And at some point in all of this online social media discourse, apparently, I haven't seen it myself, but Cawthorn describes their entry into Russia without visas as them like smoothly, slickly talking their way in to Russia, which is not a thing generally that's done, but that's what he said about it. And not only did they talk their way into Russia, but they talked their way right into an illegal underground casino somehow, which makes me think that his talking his way into Russia was speaking to somebody at the port in St. Petersburg and having a local, gangster-affiliated hood say, oh, if you pay me money, I'll slip you in my car, visa or not, and take you to a casino. And we'll take all your money, or maybe your kidneys, or whatever, and, if nothing else, set you up with somebody who will, put a handler in your lap, and then we'll have a congressman on the payroll. So, anyway, it does seem like... I guess I'm not really sure that he met her while he was a congressman. That's true, too, because he's only been a congressman for like 15 minutes. So, let's see. He would have been elected. I mean, he's been in office for 8 months. So, maybe they got married after he took office, but he met her earlier. I'm not certain about when they met, but maybe Soy Chica can figure that out from some of her information. She says, it looks like Madison Cawthorn's supposedly random trip to Russia was in fact part of a cruise itinerary aboard Royal Caribbean's Brilliance of the Seas, which explains, there is a ferry from Helsinki, Finland, not Helsinki, right? Okay, Helsinki, Finland to St. Petersburg. It's not a short ride, but it's a doable thing. But of course you got to have visas. And this would be a way to get to Russia without necessarily, without doing all the legwork yourself of getting the visa. There would be, it would be something that could be arranged through the cruise company and through excursion operators in the port city. And, that seems to make a little bit more sense. Like, an excursion to a casino. Sure, the casino is illegal, but, we don't tell you that. And the authorities look the other way because it's owned by an oligarch or something like that, right? So, anyway, it looks like Madison Cawthorn's random trip to Russia was part of a cruise itinerary aboard Royal Caribbean's Brilliance of the Seas. Or some other boat, I guess. They exactly duplicated the itinerary and found another ship with an Izumi on board, which I guess is one of the onboard restaurants. I don't really know what Izumi is, but you can see it in one of the photos there, so... that's kind of a dead giveaway that that it's an Izumi, and I don't know how many of them are on boats. I don't know what Izumi is, so there you are. It's Izumi is sushi. There's one here in Virginia, apparently, in Great Falls. So we should go there. Want to go? It's near the Safeway. All right. Well, anyway, if you want to go, it's at 9861 Georgetown Pike in Great Falls. So not far. It's closed right now. They only open after the show, 11:30. So anyway, here you can answer my question. What does Izumi mean in English? It means spring of water. Or water spring, probably. Anyway, so that's very nice. And they have one on board this boat. You can see it's in the background of their pictures, so it seems to be a dead giveaway. Not a whole lot of, I guess, seagoing Izumi sushi operations out there. Probably the Royal Caribbean Brilliance of the Seas. And so, no, they either did that or they exactly duplicated the itinerary and found another ship with an Izumi on board, leaving for Russia, or leaving Russia in their stop on June 15th, which is apparently when he went. And here is the 12-night Baltic cruise that ran from May 2018. I don't know whether this is all the dates that they run it. May 2018, they do June, July, August. Anyway, all summer long. So let's see, if that's 2018, then he's not yet elected to Congress, but he's running. So that's of interest. Anyway, so the ports of call, it begins and ends in Amsterdam, which is not that near Russia, but is near enough to the Baltic. And you sail up and around Denmark, and it looks like you stop in Denmark at, how do they pronounce all these things? Skagen, would it be? Skagen? And they do some cruising. They do stop in Estonia first. Tallinn, Estonia. Then on to St. Petersburg, Russia. And I guess they're there for quite some time. Then they go from St. Petersburg to Helsinki, Finland. So he actually, I guess, went the other direction and ended up in Finland after. So he took the boat. The boat went from Amsterdam to Skagen to Tallinn to St. Petersburg, then back around Helsinki, Stockholm, and Copenhagen, right? From another Denmark thing, and then back to Amsterdam. It does say here ports of call and times may vary, but that appears to be his itinerary because his friends, and I guess he and his friends' social media document the trip. There's a picture at the Catherine Palace in St. Petersburg. Here is a picture of a coffee cup from which they are drinking, tagged Stockholm, Sweden. And I love this city. And then it just says Finland. It would be, of course, Helsinki. And I don't know whose Instagram it was that says, I love this city. But then there are also pictures, and this one appears to be with Madison Cawthorn's little identifying icon up in the corner here in Tallinn, Estonia. And his comment on this one, it's a perfectly nice picture, but, you know, like he said, he's a college dropout, et cetera, et cetera. His comment on it is, this is a country? Like, I don't know what that, I'm not certain what he means exactly by that. But then other photos also tagged Denmark and Amsterdam. So, okay, they've traveled this whole route, and Soy Chica has more here by way of the photos. Let's see. Then there is a strange scene. You can see the Izumi on the deck of the ship that they're on, and his other 12-year-old friends are here, and they're messing around on video camera and doing such fun things as lining up for pictures, and then just as the picture is about to be snapped, they whack each other in the crotch so that they double over in pain and get a funny picture out of it. So, you know, awesome adult stuff, like we said, that they were doing. There's a link here to their brochure for the cruise, in case you wanted to take a look at that. And all of the I guess when you go and look at the pictures on their Instagram accounts, you can get the dates off of them, and that tells you when they were taking the pictures and on the cruise. She goes on then to say, note, cruise info on page 17, wheelchair accessible suites on the boat. So that makes some good sense for him. Then, interesting, a photo of Cawthorn. He has taken this with him. I guess they've thought it to be a great idea to take a American flag with them on their trip, because they'll be traveling around Europe and you want to wave an American flag wherever you go, traveling around abroad. And here a photo someone takes of him posing in St. Petersburg, I think, with nice scenery in the background, but has the flag draped over his shoulders. And then a lot of discussion about the visa stuff. One of the commenters here says, trying to figure out which part was the lie then. Is Royal Caribbean in the habit of bringing whole cruise ships into port cities without appropriate visas? Here Cawthorn says, American pride, brought some American pride to the Russian Federation. Also, we talked our way in without visas, so that's a win for sure. And then he puts in parentheses, of his own admission, bribery, ? And we don't really know. But apparently, probably not. It was just a cruise, and that's where the ship stopped. And you're allowed to get off and go on excursions from the land-based private tour guides. And the one they chose, having landed in St. Petersburg, land of mystery, was to go to the casino. The illegal casino, where they went and hung out there. All right, well, let's see. So they that appears to have solved the mystery of how they did this thing. There's a commenter here who says, I've been on this cruise. St. Petersburg was the only place you couldn't do your own thing. You didn't leave the ship without being a part of a cruise excursion, unless you had a private Russian tour guide, which was secured months in advance. Nothing is by chance. So, there you go. He may just be kind of embellishing the tale of how he got there to make it seem more dashing, daring, and romantic, I suppose, not in the romantic love sense, but, in the romantic tales that he tells. And anyway, so there's more to it and more things that other people found online about this, but it was definitely a very weird thing that he's hesitant about how he gets there, and he's hesitant about what order the trip was in, and how the trip was really to places near, just places near Russia. There weren't that many, but they, but he couldn't really bring himself to name them. I think he said Norway. They didn't seem to make a stop in Norway. Anyway, kind of weird. And then back to Susie Madrick here, which is where I started on this whole thing over at Crooks and Liars. So there's this. Madison Cawthorn recently announced his divorce from Christina Bayardelli, I guess is the last name, Bayardelle, an Instagram fitness instructor. But now he's sharing the strange story of how they met, set up with a fake story by an American stranger he just happened to meet in Russia. You see why this is kind of questionable. I suspect there will be much, much more about this story, because this sounds like a national security problem, except, he doesn't have a hand in any actual policy, so there's not that problem. Anyway, Grant Stern on Twitter said, Madison Cawthorn's divorce just went from boring information to national security concern in about 77 seconds of interview time with the Daily Caller. This does not sound like a normal meet cute story, whatever. A normal meet or a cute story or whatever, I guess, or whatsoever. Very few of these stories involving Russia are. All I got from this video is that Madison Cawthorn married a honeypot, tweeted angry staffer, a former White House staffer, allegedly. Now that he's made a complete ass of himself and spent a year trying to subvert democracy, her mission appears to be over. And it's time to go, I guess. Angry staffer also tweeting, by the way, for what it's worth, Cawthorn is exactly the kind of person a hostile intelligence agency would target. He's a known serial liar, so there's plenty of blackmail opportunity just in the public record. He's also young, decidedly not smart, and easy to manipulate. Others commenting, interesting, Madison Cawthorn's honeypot soon-to-be ex-wife. He met her through a Russian agent. I don't know if that's the case, but he did meet her through somebody he happened to meet in an illegal casino for no particular reason. Army captain just hanging out there in Russia. And seems to have won his loyalties over for Mother Russia, which is what they call, what these guys on this trip label their pictures as they're leaving. Goodbye, Mother Russia, which, might just be imitating Russian speech there. But there you go. Ron Filipkowski also tweeting again on this subject. Putin's spokesman, Madison Cawthorn, delivered the Kremlin talking points on Ukraine today on Fox News. This is the quote that he gave, too. This was of some interest. This is on December 26th. Apparently, we've been fighting in a sandbox and in caves for the last 20 years, Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the Russians, they've been creating hypersonic missiles that can sink our entire fleet in the Black Sea. Nice. And, of course, word is from the Russia watchers that clip is all over the Russian news. They are thrilled to death with an American congressman saying that Russian military might can easily overwhelm and defeat the American Navy at the drop of a hat because we've been, quote, fighting in a sandbox and in caves. Which, I don't know, that actually sounds kind of hard. Anyway, others, here's the comment from one Jason Dunlop, who tweets, there are no legitimate casinos in St. Petersburg. None. There are, quote-unquote, social clubs that allow gambling to foreigners of interest who are given an opportunity to compromise themselves. That's of some interest. And let's see, others comment. Here's Truth Sandwich saying, the inane Cawthorn honeypot story makes no sense unless it wasn't a legal casino, in which case, more compromat. This including the tweet of Says Dana, who says, Matty Cawthorn and his whole backstory is BS. There are only 6 zones where gambling and casinos are allowed. None of them are in St. Petersburg. Why is it that the Daily Caller right-wing site, why did they not catch that? Did they want this story to get traction? Interesting. I don't think they happened to notice that. So I guess this was before his election to Congress. Again, Truth Sandwich saying before he ran for Congress. He was already running, but he made an unscheduled, read blatantly illegal trip to Russia. In the real world, you don't just hop on a boat to enter. But now we have the itinerary. I know he makes it sound like he was just adventuring in the Baltic, but he was on a Royal Caribbean cruise. So anyway, I thought that was of some interest. Then more from, I think, other internet sleuths, including Lindy Lee, L.I. Lee, who says, I was today years old when I learned that Madison Cawthorn was recruited by an operative in St. Petersburg, Russia, who faked a CrossFit competition just to set him up with his now soon-to-be ex-wife. He admitted all of it himself on his video. Welcome to the GOP, or Government of Putin. In a series of Instagram stories glorifying Russia, Madison Cawthorn and his friends referred to the Russian Federation, one of our country's greatest adversaries, as Mother Russia. I'd said adversaries for those of you who are annoyed with my adversaries pronunciation. The actual commies have the gall to call us commies. Of course, they're not actually commies anymore. But anyway, irony is completely dead, as are many people who oppose the regime. Anyway, others, again, assigning him the role of operative. I don't know if that's actually true, but it seems pretty clear that there was some weird circumstances and there was somebody very interested in entertaining a candidate for Congress who was young and foolish, hanging out in Russia and setting him up with somebody later on who, briefly cohabited with him and then skipped town. So that's where we are. There was also, was there more to Peter Strzok's comments about this, I think? Let's go back and take a look at that. Again, he points out the weirdness around his description of having traveled to Russia, then goes on to say, yeah, he starts by looking up and right and then down. He's doing this sort of watching his expressions. The only time he does that is during this clip. Now turn up the volume and listen to what he's talking about during those 5 seconds. We lack a lot of context. Does he ordinarily look up and to the right and then down if he's honestly trying to remember something? Or it could be he knows some information is going to come out. He's trying to get ahead of it to set the narrative, and that makes him nervous. But it's clear there's something unusual, whether he's nervous or lying about something else, about how he found himself in St. Petersburg. Is he some nefarious Russian penetration? Almost certainly not. Is there something more here? Almost certainly yes. And what a coincidence. Cawthorn recently started talking about Russia's military might, which was promptly picked up by Russian state media channel Rossiya 1. Hopefully they wheeled out Andrei Brezukov again to talk about it. I don't know who that is. Glad he's found meaningful work. Noting Peter Strzok is the tweet of Julia Davis at Julia Davis News, who watches such things and such developments in Russia all the time. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy, and it could be interesting, and there could be more to come. I hope so, because we've spent almost an hour on it, so I hope it pays off in the end. I would keep a close eye on that story and see if it develops into something particularly interesting. All right, so another story that occupied a lot of my time yesterday, and so therefore will occupy a lot of your time today. I happened to notice this story circulating in a couple of sources. I grabbed this one from Business Insider. I guess the January 6th committee, being very careful and very deliberate about what they charge here and what accusations they make, have been investigating in particular what is it that took Donald Trump so long to attempt, in his weird and weak way, to call off the riot. Remember, he's being begged by everyone. That's what we learned. Well, we knew that at the time, plus we learned it again and in slightly different ways from, Mark Meadows' cell phone and all of the texts that are on it, all the different people who were begging him to call this thing off. That was the story last week. Why does it take him so long to do that? And why is his only call for people to leave the Capitol that stilted, weird video in which he says, go home, be peaceful, we love you, you're all very special people, blah, blah, blah. And that takes him an awful long time to produce. And I guess the committee is interested in trying to find out, was he delaying because, as we actually suspect, he was enjoying the riot and was hoping to give it time to succeed? Or was there some other more innocent reason for waiting? So now they're investigating. I guess the storyline maybe that they might be getting out of the White House, or the former White House, the former administration and the people representing him, was that, well, we were trying to get them to leave much earlier, but we were having difficulty making the video. And that was the delay. It wasn't that we didn't want to stop the riot, because now we realized we could be in trouble for the riot, but that we were taking our time to get it right. So Business Insider reports the headline here: Trump kept having to retape his video telling fans to leave the Capitol riot, which may explain his 187-minute silence during the attack, January 6th committee chair says. That's a long headline. Apparently no way to shorten it, because it's a complicated story. Why would the chair of the January 6th committee say that? Because he's being careful. There is a possible explanation for the delay that doesn't necessarily tend to prove that he wanted the riot to continue. But you're not supposed to necessarily believe that story. It's just a story that's being told. We're putting it out there in an abundance of caution and in order to be thorough. Insider then has a bunch of bullet points, which I think essentially ruins the reading of the story. But if you didn't want to read the story, you could just read those instead. President Donald Trump had to reshoot a video during the Capitol riot because, quote, he wouldn't say the right thing to tell his supporters to go home, the chair of the January 6th committee said. It appears that he tried to do a taping several times, but he wouldn't say the right thing, Representative Benny Thompson told the Washington Post, citing witness interviews and media reports. I think I'd like to take a look at that article too. But yeah, that's how they're getting to it. Their headline over the Washington Post explains the setup a little better. Thompson says January 6th committee focused on Trump's hours of silence during the attack, weighing criminal referrals. That's kind of where we left it last week, I think. Yeah, and this is a December 23rd article. The Insider piece is dated the 24th, the next day. So they're sort of digesting this stuff. Publicly, Trump remained silent for 187 minutes after his supporters breached the Capitol on January 6th. A little bit reminiscent of George W. Bush's paralysis after word of the September 11th attacks. The committee investigating the riot is trying to understand why the former president took so long to speak as it weighs recommending criminal charges against him. Thompson's comments follow increasing speculation that Trump's behavior during the riot could mean he illegally obstructed Congress. Representative Liz Cheney, the vice chair of the January 6th committee, previously suggested that the committee could find Trump guilty of criminal obstruction, but not guilty per se, because not in the criminal sense, but they would like to see that he be tried in a criminal context. In the video he eventually put out on January 6th, Trump told his supporters at the Capitol to go home and called the mob very special people. Thompson told the Post that the fact that Trump had to keep retaping the video, if it is a fact, was of interest to the committee because it could help explain why it took so long to speak. The reasons for Trump's delayed response were significant because they could help the committee decide whether to make the criminal referral against Trump, Thompson said. In that case, Congress would inform the Justice Department that it believed a crime was committed. The federal prosecutors would decide whether to bring charges against Trump. One of those concerns is that whether or not it was intentional and whether or not that lack of attention for a longer period of time would warrant a referral, he told the Post. Representatives for Trump did not immediately respond to Insider's request for comment. That's a nice short write-up of what happened there. It fits in right before the break, but you get what they're after. If they were to buy, or they say, oh, a jury could, find that that was the reason, in other words, you can't find beyond a reasonable doubt that he was delaying on purpose, then maybe they wouldn't make that charge. But it does sound kind of fishy. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's see. So I was leaving that off and saying, yeah, it does sound rather fishy, doesn't it? Well, on the one hand, yes. On the other hand, no. That's the way it has to be if you're going to do the on the other hand thing, although some people do add the other hand. I frequently do. So what do I mean by it sounding fishy? It is believable that someone as dopey as Donald Trump would have difficulty getting the message right. He was trying, even the last message that he finally released, if there was more than one. I mean, we don't really know. That's just the claim of the White House, I assume. Yeah, I'm not even sure it's the claim of the White House. All I have here is that Benny Thompson says that someone said that they tried to tape it over and over again. Maybe the Post article would give us more information on that. But accepting as true that it's a story that came from the White House and that they really did tape this thing over and over again. Well, for one thing, it doesn't necessarily mean he spent 187 minutes doing it. The final product wasn't particularly good. I don't know that I would say there's evidence of, several dozen takes and several dozen refinements of the script. It still seems pretty ad-libbed. And I wonder what he would have said in some of the other things. And that would be interesting, too. I don't know whether they would have the ability to recover some of those things. But I guess if I'm on the January 6th committee, and I assume they have pretty good investigators, but if I'm working there, I would say, all right, well, I'd like to see some of the versions of the video he didn't use. And I wonder if they would be able to claim that was privileged in some way. Well, we decided that this wasn't an appropriate message to send, so we didn't use it, and in all likelihood deleted it from whatever device. But I wonder if it could be recovered from something, if they could find the right medium. But anyway, I'd like to know, and I might even say, well, I don't even necessarily need to review the content of the messages. What I'd like is the metadata about their creation. Why? So that I can see if you really spent 187 minutes trying to shoot this video. Or did you try it several times, but it was the last 15 minutes before you finally sent the thing, and 172 of the minutes are still unaccounted for. We sat on our hands for 172 minutes and then spent 15 minutes trying to make a 1-minute video. I could believe that as a possibility. I'd like to know. Show me some evidence that you tried for the bulk of that 187 minutes to get that message out, and we'll talk about it. Then, of course, there's also this. Why a video message at all? I mean, that is a quick way to get it into everybody's hands. You put it out over Twitter and all of the fans there would download it and see it because they were all waiting for instructions for Trump. But that, too, is not actually good evidence for his side in this investigation. Remember that there are still people who stick to the idea that it was really all a bunch of Antifa operatives dressed up as Trump supporters trying to make trouble. Why would they be so closely monitoring then President Trump's social media presence? What would be the point of that? It would be very unlikely that they would see and take their instruction from Donald Trump via Twitter video. But, of course, if the crowd was his supporters, which is what all the Republicans who were calling him from the Capitol, begging him to call off the riot, were saying, and he was denying, but apparently he thought he could communicate directly with them through a Twitter video anyway. Which then brings you to the question of, okay, it's taking you an awful long time to prepare your message and get it right. Why not skip the whole thing and just go to the Capitol and tell them to leave? Well, of course, if I'm a Secret Service agent, I might say, well, it's too dangerous to go down there, of course. But remember again that to this day, Trump's story is that it was not violent down there, that they were hugging and kissing the police because they support them so much. Well, if it's just a bunch of hugging and kissing going on, why not go down there? Besides, it didn't bother you that there was an actual hostile crowd, though not violent, but a hostile crowd. This crowd you said was also nonviolent, but there was a crowd that you said was violent that wasn't in Lafayette Square Park across from the White House in June earlier in the year, and my God, that's this year. And you swept them out of the way in a matter of minutes. You had no problem getting to, for instance, the front of St. John's Church to hold up a Bible and have that crazy photo op. And the photo op of you walking across the street, too. Street lined with cops. You just sent in overwhelming force, pushed everybody out of the way, gassed them until they were gone, and declared, this zone closed off except for you and your family and your aides walking over there for this photo op. Why couldn't you do the same thing at the Capitol? And the reason is you didn't want to. You were in favor of this riot. You sent those people there. Why not go there and address them? Because that would have worked and they probably would have left. Or perhaps you were afraid that they would boo you as they did later when you started saying you should be getting the vaccine. So, I don't know. I just found that interesting. When he wanted to get Lafayette Square cleared out and there was a huge crowd there and one that was hostile to him, he got it done in a couple of minutes. Didn't take him 187 minutes to put that photo op together. He just went. But from here, in this situation, he decided, I can do this all remotely. I'll send a video. That's the way it'll work. Okay. Well, so I have questions about that. I would keep pressing him on that, and I would definitely press him on, let me see some evidence of the claim that you were making. You spent all this time trying to put together the right message. And I would be interested in seeing some of the wrong messages. What did you reject? Because the one you accepted was pretty terrible to begin with. And maybe the committee would be interested, and we would get a better idea of how committed you really were to ending the insurrection if we could see some of the earlier videos, because you didn't do a particularly good job telling these guys that they had done anything wrong in the one you released. I'd like to see what you thought was appropriate to tell them. Whether we'd get a hold of it, whether because of some privilege or whether because it was erased, I have no idea, but I'd be interested in finding what happened. Okay, Well, at any rate, I just thought that that was perhaps something you might want to discuss, and the committee certainly is looking into it. Let's see, we got a couple other pieces to share here. Well, maybe what we'll do we'll have our last segment be the Joan-like segment when we discuss some of the happenings in Congress, and we can remain more general for the moment. Let's see, another piece from Bloomberg about the Capitol riot here. Do I have access to this one, or is it going to tell me it's paywalled? Yeah, paywalled. Do I have the pocket version of it? No, not that either. But I guess there was more happenings in court. The headline on this piece here is Trump defends remarks in suit blaming him for Capitol riot. This is the lawsuit filed by the Capitol police officers and blaming him for having incited the riot. He's trying, of course, to get that case thrown out of court. He has an interesting argument that he has made here, which, again, I guess I got to go back to the pocket version to see it. And all I can tell you is the very basics of it in the first paragraph. Former President Donald Trump is seeking dismissal of a suit accusing him of sparking the January 6th Capitol riot, arguing that speakers at political rallies, which is, of course, how the day started, right? Before he then said, let's go down to the Capitol. I'll go right with you. We'll march down there and we'll fight like hell, yada, yada. But he argues that speakers at political rallies don't have a legally enforceable duty of care to adversaries or others who might find themselves in the path of impassioned supporters. So his claim is, if he gives a speech saying, let's march down to the Capitol, let's ransack the place, whatever, he doesn't say that. We'll fight like hell or you won't have a country anymore. We'll march down there, blah, blah. I don't have any, as a political speaker at a rally, I don't have any duty of care to anybody who might get killed by the mob that I set on foot, to use the insurrection statutory language, to do what they did at the Capitol. It's not my fault. I don't owe anybody any care. I shouldn't have to tell people, let's remember to be peaceful. Obviously, he's going to make that argument. I mean, he's been caught 100 times at his rallies. Beat the hell out of that guy. I'll pay your medical bills, or I'll pay your legal bills, etc. So, it's an interesting argument. There'll be some First Amendment questions, etc., etc. But he's also the president of the United States at the time, and he would have the duty to see that the laws be faithfully executed. And, you would hope for more from an elected official and a leader of the free world than that he would just speak off the cuff as though he were a grassroots political activist, who you would probably end up holding liable because he's a powerless person versus the very powerful person, who's now, of course, powerless. So, might as well bring that up and see if we can convince the court with that one. Let's see. Other interesting stories of note. I don't usually pick up much of what Eric Garland tweets, because he's okay. I find him somewhat suspect every once in a while. He tends to, I think, what's the expression people use? Get out over his skis, which doesn't make any sense to me because I don't ski, but I suppose that's not where you're supposed to be. Anyway, so he notes from this piece in the, the Post-Gazette, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, a special report of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette from Boxing Day, December 26th, with shadowy money, Ukraine oligarch, became Cleveland's biggest landlord. That's interesting. Subheader here says that the feds say power broker laundered millions in skyscrapers and luxury hotel. Now, who would ever think that Ukrainian and or Russian oligarchs would be laundering millions of money in skyscrapers and luxury hotels in America's largest cities? Not me. That would never occur to me or Donald Trump. But here's the interesting thing. There's not a Trump building involved here, but there's still Trump involvement here. That's what Eric Garland picks out of this story. The story by Michael Sala and Ashley Murray, reporting as follows. For Ukraine oligarch Ihor, and I guess that's the Ukrainian pronunciation and spelling of Igor, I-H-O-R, Ihor Kolomoisky, the Westin Hotel in Cleveland that he owns with partners became the center of the most powerful Republican gathering in the nation during the 2016 convention. That's the connection. Then candidate Donald Trump set up his headquarters in the downtown luxury hotel. Interesting. So the 2016 convention is in Cleveland. I'm sure that wasn't his first choice, but that was made ahead of time. And anyway, so he goes to set up shop there, the most important, the center of gravity, around which people will be lobbying, the nominee's hotel. He chose the downtown Westin Hotel in Cleveland, which may or may not be the most luxurious hotel in town, may or may not be the closest to the convention center. I'm not really sure exactly what the deal is, but I could see that being the case. Maybe it's just connected to the convention center or very close to it, even though when you're there as the party's nominee, proximity of the hotel to the convention hall isn't your first concern the way it might be if you're a delegate or other visitor to the convention. Although, it's a big mark of prestige, the, VIPs, the most important people among the VIPs get the closest to the convention center hotel. But if you're the nominee and you're going by limo and Secret Service, you can kind of stay wherever you want. And I could see him insisting on the most luxurious place in town, whether it's close by or not. But actually, let's do the internet sleuthing while we're here. Let's see. Look at the maps over at Google, and we'll say, let's see. I don't know what's the name of the convention center in Cleveland. Do you know? Convention Center, Cleveland, Ohio. Let's see. There's the Huntington Convention Center, the International Exposition Center, and the Global Center for Health Innovation. That's probably not it. Let's say the International Exposition Center. I don't know. And then, let's see. There's 2 convention centers mapped there. Where are these other ones? They're all off the map here. All right, let's say the Huntington Convention. I guess we got to look that up too, right? So if we say, what convention center was it? Republican, I should just get to the story. Republican National Convention. You like the tapping of the noise? It's a sound effect. I'm not actually, okay, I am typing. 2016, Cleveland. And let's see. So will it tell us where it was? Will Wikipedia tell us? The Quicken Loans Arena in Cleveland. So what did they do? An outdoor thing? Is that what it was? Oh, look at it. And it's now the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Is that it's changed names here? All right, let me click through to the Wikipedia entry here. All right, the Quicken Loans Arena. And is now the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. And what the hell is that? I mean, I don't know. It's where the Cleveland Cavaliers, NBA Cavs, play. And also, by the way, the Cleveland Monsters of the American Hockey League, in case you were wondering. It also serves as a secondary arena for Cleveland State Vikings men's and women's basketball. So very fun. And wonderful place. Let's say is part of the Gateway Sports and Entertainment Complex with adjacent Progressive Field. What do you know? So fantastic. They went there. Now let's see if I can look on it on the map. Let's go back to Rocket. We'll look it up that way. Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. There we are. Center Court. Now, what hotels are nearby is what I was looking for. I guess I want to know how far from there to the Westin Hotel. I'm just now curious about that. Directions, please. Westin Hotel, Cleveland downtown. I imagine that's it. Yeah, not too far. 3 miles. And like I said, if the presidential nominee wants to go there, that's fine. And because it's not a convention center, there's probably not hotels directly attached to the place. But very often, some of the sports complexes have got that these days. You never know. Let's zoom in and see what's nearby there. And there's the headquarters of the Cleveland Monsters, the Cavaliers team shop. Any hotels identified right nearby? Well, I don't... Oh, there we go. The closest, I guess, would be the Hotel Indigo Cleveland downtown, and who knows whether they have the sort of suites that Donald Trump is going to want. Anyway, no longer really an issue. I just thought I would see if it was the closest by and you could figure it out. But anyway, Michael Sala and Ashley Murray think they have a different story here. So, then candidate Donald Trump set up his headquarters in the downtown luxury hotel. His family members and top advisors stayed in the penthouse presidential suite, which they might not have at the Indigo place there. In the lobby that showcases modern, eclectic art, the future president met with a crush of reporters the morning after he delivered his acceptance speech at the convention, gushing over the local hospitality. The lobby of the Westin Hotel is a palace for insiders, whatever that's supposed to mean. Oh, I'm sorry. That was what the Washington Post wrote. So we don't know what the hell they mean, and it wasn't in his voice. 5 years later, the 484-room facility with waterfront views is the target of a legal battle that pits the hotel owners against lenders over control of one of the last vestiges of the Ukraine power broker's U.S. real estate empire. Remember, we're talking of Ihor Kolomoisky here. The hotel is part of a portfolio including iconic skyscrapers in Cleveland that collapsed amid a series of stunning failures and a federal investigation of allegations that the oligarch and others stole hundreds of millions of dollars from Ukraine's largest bank and then, secretly, plowed the money into U.S. real estate, including the 4-star hotel, which is apparently awfully easy to do. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette has chronicled Mr. Kolomoisky's foray into the U.S. steel industry and his purchases of factories from New York to Texas. Most of the facilities bought with money embezzled from Ukraine's largest financial institution. U.S. prosecutors allege. Okay. It's all just allegations. But Mr. Kolomoisky's venture into Cleveland under a web of companies known as Optima remains one of the most troubling examples of what's gone wrong with financial transparency laws in the U.S. and how an oligarch and his partner dominated the real estate of a major American city without ever disclosing his ownership. That is an interesting question, isn't it? Of course, what caught Eric Garland's eye here, his take on it, just to give you that very quickly, is, wait, Trump set up his 2016 GOP convention headquarters in a Cleveland hotel owned by a Ukrainian mob boss? Where have they, and this is the convention where they changed the GOP platform to leave Ukraine undefended? What WTF, he wonders. And of course, Ukrainian mob bosses, you might wonder, why would a Ukrainian mob boss want to leave Ukraine undefended? Remember that Ukrainian mob bosses, generally speaking, are the pro-Russian types. They are taking over Ukraine in the name of the Russian sympathetic oligarchy, and that's why they would want to leave Ukraine undefended. He's not a loyal Ukrainian who also happens to be a mobster. So there you have it. That's kind of interesting. Garland, by the way, goes on with more comments here saying, so the Russian mafia used the manufactured 2008 housing crisis as a chance to buy up the American heartland's real estate, and then the GOP used Russian mob assets for their 2016 presidential campaigns. This is, of course, all speculation. Makes sense. Now let's dismantle these effers. So, there's more to it, and he calls out a couple of other things, too. If we don't make it all the way through the article, we can make it through his highlights of it. But let's read a little bit more detail here, because why not? That's what the show's about. The 58-year-old billionaire and others bought the towers through companies set up in Delaware. It's an issue. One of the nation's foremost havens for corporate secrecy, through a litany of offshore shell companies in amounts that forced taxpayers in Ukraine to turn over billions to save the bank. They had to use a public bailout of the bank after he embezzled all this money and invested it in Cleveland and elsewhere. By the way, I know we're all troubled by the mention of Delaware, a perpetual problem for them. But somewhere buried in pocket, which I haven't brought up yet, is the big challenge posed to Delaware, the only other state with banking laws as gross, if not grosser than those in Delaware. Challenging them for this position is South Dakota. Kristi Noem's South Dakota. Although I think it predates her, certainly. They've been trying to become a haven for, well, not intentionally for money laundering, but, wink, wink, for quite a while now. Anyway, far from the usual havens for shadowy money, Cleveland has become the center of an international money laundering probe. Less attention there, right? That has attracted the attention of Congress and led agents several times to the Ukraine capital of Kyiv to meet with the country's law enforcement leaders. How interesting, especially with the Delaware connection in there. I'm sure they probably thought they were going to get Hunter Biden in all of this at some point. Not the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette people, although maybe that might have been what they were after. I have no idea. But anyway, it does attract less attention if you launder your money in Cleveland, and you don't have to deal with the Southern District of New York and their investigators. Well, anyway, it's happening to Middle America, or in Middle America. That's what's moving the needle. It's a new front in how money laundering is used, says Scott Graytack, Advocacy Director for Transparency International in Washington, D.C., a nonprofit that tracks global corruption. Complicating matters, Cleveland was in the throes of the historic downturn in the real estate market when the oligarch and his partners emerged as the largest commercial landlords, with local leaders looking for ways to bring badly needed investors to the city. This is also about the time when Trump is purchasing a whole bunch of golf courses in cash during the real estate crash, and everyone's wondering, where are you getting all this cash? Given that your real estate portfolio, everyone's real estate portfolio is taking a hit, and you're all about real estate. And Eric Trump decides to tell somebody, we have all the cash we need. We have lots more than that coming from, Russia. And everyone said, Russia? Okay, well, there's more here. The case raises questions about the scrutiny performed by local leaders when they provided millions in public loans to the company in deals that are now the target of court fights, putting millions of dollars at risk for taxpayers and investors. And remember, now we're not talking about Ukraine taxpayers and investors who had to bail out the Ukrainian bank from which this guy stole all the money. We're talking about American taxpayers in Cleveland putting up money to finalize these deals. These were such lucrative deals for the city that they went out of their way for tax breaks and all sorts of financing and benefits and put up public money to help this guy launder his stolen money. By not knowing all the owners, there's no accountability, said Cleveland City Councilman Joe Jones, who's got anonymity built into his name. It makes no sense that anyone should be able to invest in our country and we don't know who they are. The case has been cited by financial crimes experts to support major proposals unveiled this month by the U.S. Treasury that would make real estate deals in companies more transparent by requiring ownership disclosures. Guess who might have been opposed to that and able to control that just a few months ago? The pipeline of millions into Cleveland and other places, New York, has already prompted a federal grand jury investigation in Ohio that led FBI agents last year to raid Optima's landmark skyscraper, One Cleveland Center. That same day, the FBI also descended on Optima's 55-story penthouse in Miami, overlooking Biscayne Bay, in what became the first public alert of a criminal probe that involved the Justice Department's anti-money laundering unit. The FBI, which hauled away boxes of records in the raids, did not respond to emailed questions. No one has yet been charged, but prosecutors took action last year to seize some of the buildings, including a 22-story skyscraper in the heart of Cleveland's downtown, in forfeiture cases that trace hundreds of millions from Ukraine to the United States between 2008 and 2016. Mr. Kolomoisky, who was banned from the United States by the State Department over corrupt practices, did not respond to interview requests. One of his top associates in the United States, Mordecai or Moti Korf, K-O-R-F, a Miami Beach resident who helped carry out the purchases, has not replied to interview requests. Again, a weird Miami, Florida connection, like also those Trump towers built in the area, not inside Miami. The real estate's too expensive for him there. But what do they call the place? Southern, I can't remember the name of the development there. But anyway, Mr. Korf's attorney, Mark Kasowitz, said in a recent statement that his client had done nothing wrong, like Rand Paul's neighbor, I would say. Mr. Korf never engaged in money laundering of any kind and has no knowledge of anyone else doing so, he said. Any allegations against Mr. Korf are false and irresponsible and arise from Ukrainian political disputes he has nothing to do with and ultimately will be dismissed. We'll see about that. Mr. Kolomoisky's venture into Cleveland was launched in 2008 when he and others moved $12.9 million into the country to buy one of the city's most visible high-rises, 55 Public Square, prosecutors say. More after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. You're on Netroots Radio, ordinarily the place where we would welcome Joan McCarter to the show, and we'll shift over to stories that we would have discussed with her, and we'll discuss with her next week, I'm sure. We really miss having her here, of course, but, these things happen and we can deal with it, but we lament the loss, to be certain. Anyway, let me continue then. I'll take advantage of this opportunity to continue with this story and unearth some more of these details. And I have a feeling, we'll get a fuller picture of it if we just read it from here, then read through the highlights, as Eric Garland calls them out. Although I think he's right about where the highlights are in this. We'll do it ourselves. We do our own research on this show. All right, so where were we? Yes, right. They started back in 2008 with $12.9 million moved into the country to buy 55 Public Square, apparently a landmark downtown in Cleveland. That same year, Mr. Kolomoisky and others whisked another $36 million into the U.S. to buy One Cleveland Center, a 31-story tower with grand skylights and sweeping views of the city. In 2010, they transferred millions more into the country through 4 different offshore bank accounts to buy the Huntington Building, with vaulted ceilings and ornate columns in what was once called the world's largest bank lobby. The price, $18.5 million. Pretty cheap by real estate standards. Doesn't get you very far in New York City. So Cleveland may be a good choice in that sense. Cleveland leaders say they were buoyed by the presence of an out-of-town investor at a time when the city was hit hard by double-digit unemployment and a home foreclosure rate that was one of the highest in the country. The city couldn't it's a quote, couldn't get a pot to piss in, which I really think they could have, but, that's supposed to be metaphorical, said Jay Westbrook, then a councilman who served for 3 decades. It was just on the heels of the foreclosure crisis. You're just saying, I gotta have this. You got money. We're the town, right? I can understand why you would want to do that. And if you really couldn't get a pot to piss in, and you were, trying to be environmentally conscious and don't piss in Lake Erie, which a lot of people probably did at the time, but they're being aware of these things, and also into the storm drains that just runs into Lake Erie. You're really going to want to try. And if you do find a pot to piss in, don't then dump it in Lake Erie. I get the point. Anyway, I always found that a weird expression. Just because it didn't make any difference, generally speaking. Back in the day when you would use a pot to piss in, it was really basically, what's the point? You're going to just dump it in the street anyway. So what do you need a pot to piss in? Just go piss in the street. And it's all about modesty. I want to piss in here where people won't see me. Then I'll dump the piss in the street where people will see me. And that's still socially acceptable. But we're all dying of plague, so what's the difference? Anyway, Mr. Westbrook said his colleagues in elected office did not know where the money was coming from. You think you'd want to know. How come this bank is being sold for $18.5 million? Why is this building being sold for $36 million? Who's buying? Who are these people? You might wonder. Prosecutors say the funds were pouring into Cleveland from Privat Bank in Ukraine through a scheme in which workers in the institution loyal to Mr. Kolomoisky, then a major shareholder, so mob boss / legitimate businessman. Well, not that legitimate, I guess. He's a major shareholder, and then if you're loyal to him, you'll move money out of the bank. I mean, that's not much of a scheme, is it? I mean, what's the scheme? How do they get the money out of the bank? Well, people loyal to this guy moved the money out. So they robbed it. It's not robbery if you work there. It's embezzlement. It's different, right? You don't have to put a mask on. But they just took the money. I mean, I'm curious. Did they wire it out? Did they take cash and bundle it up? I don't know. But that's, it's not like a brilliant scheme. I like when there's a really brilliant scheme. Although I guess the brilliant scheme here is I'll use my mob money to buy stock in Privat Bank, and then I'll be the major shareholder, and then I will direct employees to move the money out. Somebody would say, you're robbing the bank, sir. That's not good. Listen, I'm the boss. I'm legit. Look, I'm the major shareholder here. I'm not a mob boss. I'm the shareholder. I own this bank. I'm telling you, the boss is telling you it's okay. Put all the cash in the bag, and no one gets hurt. I mean, that's what a robber would say. But the point is, I already own this bank, and I have a suit. And if I were robbing this bank, why would I rob this bank? I own this bank. Why would I rob myself? And the answer, of course, is, I'm going to rob you and then have the government bail out the bank. But also, I'm going to say the oldest trick in the book, and one we use here in the United States fairly frequently, despite the fact that we almost never label the bank shareholders as mobsters. But we're going to basically use, I guess, the Ukrainian equivalent of the business decision doctrine and say, well, as the owner of the bank, I directed for business reasons that all the money be moved out of the bank and into my backyard. Now, as it turns out, that was a very poor business decision. But the point is, it was a business decision. I made it in my role as chairman of the bank. We have, here in the United States, we have insurance to make sure that the directors are covered for these things. And though shareholders might sue, you say, well, some you win, some you lose. It was a bad investment. I could have bought Google stock, but instead I bought a shovel to bury this money in my backyard. I thought that was going to work out better. I guess I was just wrong. And sometimes that works in this country. So, shouldn't surprise you that it can sometimes work in Ukraine as well. All right, so they had people just move money out of the bank. It doesn't really say how. Year after year, the bank workers issued millions in loans. Oh, this isn't saying how. They issued millions in loans to companies secretly under the control of the oligarch and fellow billionaire Gennady Bogolyubov. I hope I didn't mangle that too much, because they'll murder you. And they set up in the British Virgin Islands and Cyprus, both, by the way, having tremendous waves of Omicron virus right now. And they hid the money that way. They moved the flow there, and prosecutors in this forfeiture case said they've tracked all of this. So I guess that's the idea. It wasn't so much just put all the money in a bag and move it to my house, although that may have happened too. It was, you should approve these loans, which I may or may not tell you are to me, and then I will move the money. So really, it was put all the money in the computer and no one gets hurt, and then make the computer give it to me. Next up, the money pipeline here. In most instances, the loans were fraudulent, they alleged, the prosecutors did. For example, $12 million was issued for the stated purpose of, quote, funding ongoing operations tied to the making of ferroalloys in Ukraine. But the money instead went to buy the One Cleveland Center in 2008. In another case, 5 years later, $20 million was provided to Mr. Kolomoisky's company in Ukraine for replenishing its manganese ore supply. but instead was moved through a litany of offshore companies to buy a steel plant in Kentucky, court records state. Oh. Is that the one that was so, well, I mean, any of them, buy a steel plant in Kentucky was going to be super important to Rand Paul and to Mitch McConnell. Is that the one? I don't remember Kolomoisky's name coming up in that one, but maybe I just forgotten. What is that one? Steel plant. I'll just generally Google steel plant, Kentucky, and Mitch McConnell was closely tied up in that. How a McConnell-backed effort to lift Russian sanctions. Oh, and of course, that in Time magazine, how a Russian firm gave an economic lifeline to Appalachia. But it sounds like, Russian rather than Ukrainian, although sometimes it's difficult to tell. And let me see, the Washington Post piece from 2019, how a McConnell-backed effort to lift Russian sanctions boosted a Kentucky project. Yeah. That was for Rusal, not, so that's definitely Russian and not Ukrainian. But interesting that this guy wanted a steel plant in Kentucky too. Yeah, this was Oleg Deripaska. So their plant, was for an aluminum plant in Ashland, Kentucky, which, well, let's see. So this was reported in 2019. When was the sale? Oh, they were trying to lift the sanctions. Okay, so this may have been after. Maybe they took their idea from Kolomoisky, opening the steel plant there. We'll read on. So I guess they're not the same thing. A steel plant in Kentucky. Mr. Kasowitz, who represents the oligarch's U.S. partner, remember that guy, disputed the claim, saying the legitimacy of the loans has been upheld in Ukraine courts. Always trust them. Including 6 separate trials in 2 appellate courts, and that there was no wrongdoing. So now, I guess, I wonder if this guy's Republican. He wants you to know that the administration of justice in Ukraine is on the up and up, you see. But several Ukraine legal analysts interviewed by the Post-Gazette say those court decisions were made during a campaign by the oligarch to file hundreds of cases in search of favorable judges and to withdraw from other courts to avoid losing. They were trying to use all the manipulations, said Tanya Sekchuk, legal counsel for the Anti-Corruption Action Center in Ukraine. Last year, the Ukrainian parliament responded with what members called the Anti-Kolomoisky law. Wow, that's pretty pointed. Negotiated by Ukraine's government and the International Monetary Fund, the law prohibits the oligarch from ever again gaining control over his former bank. Phew. In March, U.S. prosecutors filed a motion saying the entire flow of money was built on rampant fraud and theft. The loan applications included lies, not just about the loan's purposes, but also about the methods of repayment, prosecutors wrote. New loans, they said, were approved to pay back the old ones, something you ordinarily can't do unless you are, I guess, the boss of the bank. By 2011, Mr. Kolomoisky and others had funneled money into the country to buy 2 more Cleveland landmarks, the 21-story tower that was once the world headquarters of Penton Media, and $9 million to buy what is now the Westin Hotel. Now we're getting to that part. Through the Optima companies, Mr. Kolomoisky and his partners owned 4 office buildings and the hotel, the most commercial space of any owner in the city, prosecutors noted in court. By 2014, the city, Cuyahoga County, and the Cleveland International Fund turned over about $42 million in loans to Optima in a commitment to the company to turn the aging hotel into a 4-star facility and breathe new life into the urban core. So he could either steal that money, the $42 million that Cleveland gave him and Cuyahoga County gave him, or he could, if he wanted to, repay the loans back at Privat Bank. But why do that? In the summer of 2016, the newly unveiled Westin, with a signature restaurant and a presidential suite on the 23rd floor, that's why he went there, became the headquarters of the Trump campaign. There is no known connection between GOP and Optima other than that the hotel offered the amenities needed for the candidate in his inner circle. Okay, that could be the case. But also, there just happened to be this weird thing about Ukraine in the platform all of a sudden. This was our Super Bowl, Bob Magazzini, the hotel's general manager, told Cleveland.com. But within years A series of problems occurred that shed new light on the Optima companies and took a toll on the oligarch's fortune. Suspecting widespread fraud, the Ukraine government took over the bank that had been moving millions into the U.S., ending the flow of money that propped up the oligarch's real estate fortune. Ultimately, the government found a $5.5 billion shortfall in the bank, forcing taxpayers to make up the difference. In 2019, the Weston began to struggle to pay off their loans and soon failed to pay $1.4 million in property taxes, along with hundreds of thousands in gas, electric, and state sales taxes. Records state a foreclosure case was filed by private lenders against 55 Public Square, the first office tower bought by the oligarch and his associates, after they fell behind on millions in payment and more than $1 million in property taxes. So once again, the local governments say, we'll invest $42 million in this deal because we'll get it all back in taxes. And then, guess what? You don't get them. The takeover of the Ukrainian bank, an audit by the government, and a lawsuit by the bank in Delaware began to peel back the layers of corporations and the maze of shell companies used to move the money, revealing the major players behind the Cleveland purchases, court records show. In the years leading up to the revelations, I had never even heard the guy's, that's Kolomoisky's, name, said a Cleveland civic leader involved in one of the public loans. One of the only faces they knew from the Optima companies was Chaim Shochet, I'm guessing Shochet, the 35-year-old South Florida native and brother-in-law to Mr. Korf, who managed the Cleveland properties and is described in a lawsuit by Privatbank as a front man for the oligarch and his partners. While civic leaders described him as the person who embedded himself into the fabric of the city, as one city council member put it, local officials say that leaders should have dug deeper before turning over millions in economic development loans. Yeah, I'd like to assume that when the administration came to the table, they'd do their due diligence, said Michael Polensek, who was on the council when elected leaders approved the $1 million loan. It's clear to me they really didn't. Mayor Frank Jackson's office, which pushed for the loan in 2014, did not respond to repeated interview requests. The city's economic development department, which promoted and reviewed the deal, did not respond to emails. Edmund J. Martin, the former U.S. Treasury special agent, said because the company set up in Delaware without a full disclosure of beneficial owners, local officials should have required to know every owner of the hotel and their backgrounds, regardless of other records they provided. With millions at stake, you have to ask for that information, said Mr. Martin, a Texas-certified fraud examiner. I understand they're trying to improve the city and create jobs, and you can't fault them for trying, but you got to do your due diligence. Stephen Strishna, CEO of the Cleveland International Fund, who took over the fund after it had committed a $36 million loan to the hotel, declined to comment because his company is locked in a foreclosure battle with the hotel. His company, which administers a federal program that allows foreigners to make investments in the U.S., in U.S. projects, in return for getting green cards, Jared was into that, wasn't he? Loaned the money without the benefit of audited financial statements, key records prepared by independent accountants that traced sources of money. In most cases, it's going to show you where the money's coming from, said Mr. Martin. The records will also show the stakeholders. If you have an oligarch as an owner, but you just have figureheads that you're dealing with, you need to know that, he said. After years of dominating the downtown skyline, Optima is now down to a single office tower and is fighting to keep the hotel from being sold by a receiver. After losing a recent appeal to stop the bidding, the hotel has taken the case to the Ohio Supreme Court, while the receiver has found a buyer that has agreed to pay $40.6 million. Unless the money is recovered, Cleveland leaders say taxpayers and investors will lose millions. The whole community, everybody from the administration to council to the public, I think everybody is just watching out for this kind of thing, said City Council President-elect Blaine Griffin. So are other people outside the city. So who cares, right? One of Washington's longtime think tanks, Global Financial Integrity, included the case in a recent report on shadowy money in real estate. Citing the study, the Treasury Department unveiled a proposal this month that would require real estate professionals to research the backgrounds of owners when they pay cash for homes or commercial property, which I thought was already the law. But hey, we'll start over again. And make it have teeth? No, probably not. In the past, the government set up targeting zones to get that kind of data in cities where criminals are known to use dirty money to buy high-rises and mansions, But the Midwest didn't fall under that scrutiny. That's what made it a good target. He is smart. Experts are also pointing to the Cleveland example as a reason to create another regulation to require all anonymous companies, including limited liability entities, to identify their owners. Yeah, how about that? This is the marker in the sand, said Mr. Graytuck. This is truly potentially transformative moment for the role the U.S. plays to dirty money around the world. Established under the Corporate Transparency Act of 2020, interestingly enough, the proposal would require companies to give the name, birth date, address, and other information of the owners to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. Right? An owner is defined as anyone who wields substantial control or owns 25% or more of the business. In a statement to the Post-Gazette, Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio said the Cleveland example is one of the reasons he pushed for the groundbreaking legislation last year. The impact reminds us once again, or as he would say, the impact reminds us once again that money laundering is not a victimless crime. It hurts workers, families, and the communities in which they live, he said. That's kind of the way he said it. Mr. Polensek, the Dean of City Council, said the reform would help cities like Cleveland, which will try to recover what money it can, but the city needs to exercise a greater level of scrutiny in future deals, he said. We can be seen as desperate, but that's not the case, he said. There are fighters here. It's a very durable, gutsy town. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and lately I've been seeing too much of the ugly. We just need to do a better job. Yeah, that's a succinct encapsulation of it. We got stolen from, and we need to do better next time. Dang. Well, it is very interesting, and as they say, no connection to Trump, but what does Eric Garland see here? Of course, he sees that he picks a Ukrainian oligarch's hotel to stay in, but it might be that it was the only one with a presidential suite. Let's see. By the way, he goes on and looks at some other things and says, Ukrainian mob boss Kolomoisky, or he calls him Ukrainian Ru mob, like Russia mob boss Kolomoisky, used Mordecai Korf, and we didn't mention this name, Yuri Laber, Laber, to launder the money into Cleveland, and they're represented by, and the name came up, but did you recognize it? He says by Donald Trump's attorney, Kasowitz. That did ring a bell, that Mark Kasowitz. Is this starting to sink in, guys? Involves a whole lot of American local politicians. Well, yeah, maybe. It certainly does involve some politicians here. Let's see. Were there any other cities doing tax deals with the Russian mafia fronts? Have a look at Cleveland's Huntington building. They bought that too, right? Well, Kolomoisky did a deal with who? It says, with the partners of, it doesn't say who the partners are here, but these guys that he bought it with are partners with Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. We definitely know those guys, who did the same tax credit deals with a building in St. Louis, Missouri as well. Kolomoisky partners with Miami's Hudson Holdings, which counted convicted Rudy Giuliani accomplice Lev Parnas as a partner. Hudson took one of Kolomoisky's Cleveland buildings off his hands around the time of the 2016 election. The Huntington building is the one we're talking about, and he's provided a link here. Does it discuss Parnas at all in any of this article? I'm very curious. Anyway, it's taking a long time to come up. The St. Louis Industrial Development Authority worked with the AFL-CIO and put up over $100 million in bonds for a project that paid Rudy Giuliani's convicted partners, Parnas and Fruman, salaries, health insurance, gave them Cadillacs, etc., according to stlouistoday.com. Harkening back to reports from the Palm Beach Post in 2017. So, you've got local politicians and bureaucrats in the Midwest giving tax credits to mix with laundered foreign money. Gosh, I hope they don't call those who discover this kind of complex scheme crazy to cover their tracks. I guess that's something that's happened to him a couple of times. And he includes here the link to an article. AFL-CIO may help finance massive downtown railway exchange redevelopment down in St. Louis. Or out in St. Louis, I guess we should say. The St. Louis Railway Exchange Project has been the recent target of many a lawsuit. Under which statute? Civil RICO, racketeering. Okay, well, a lot of dirt being flung. We'll see where it lands and whether it develops into anything. Oh, I'm developing Sherrod Brown voice here in the closing minutes of the show. So that actually gives me a cheap and easy way to segue back to the Senate and something I wanted to discuss with Joan, but we'll wait until next week. As you know, I mean, things aren't likely to change anytime soon. But I did see something in Axios the other day that was intriguingly titled, Biden doubles down on filibuster rules change to pass voting rights, reports Emma Hurt here, in the inimitable, and really shouldn't be imitating, Axios' style here. President Biden is willing to support, quote, whatever it takes, including working around the Senate's filibuster rule in the name of passing voting legislation. He has shifted his position on the filibuster in recent months, and that's good. Driving the news? The quote, if the only thing standing between getting voting rights legislation passed and not getting it passed is the filibuster, I support making an exception on voting rights for the filibuster, Biden said during an interview with CBS, or rather ABC. I just assigned it to a different network. ABC News on Wednesday night. Why it matters? Because America. But as you know, they want to say something. Democratic calls to pass federal voting legislation have strengthened recently. That's not why it matters. It's just another thing. In a letter to his colleagues this week, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said the Senate will consider voting rights legislation in January, and that the chamber would consider changes to any rules which stand in the way. It just won't happen this year. Martin Luther King III has said there should be no celebration of MLK Day next month without the legislation. We'll see whether that makes any difference. The catch-up quick section here. The House passed voting rights and election reform bills, but the legislation has been stuck in the Senate for months. Axios' Alexei McCammond writes, yes, but is the next thing that says not all Senate Democrats, including Senator Joe Manchin and Senator Kyrsten Sinema, have backed the strategy. Well, you know, no news there, but you know, they owe it to their readers to remark upon that. Let's see. Other things of great interest, of course. Joan has had an eye on that and had a couple of great stories, which, well, since she's not on the show today, that means we don't have to limit it to today. We could discuss these things all week long, and so we definitely will. She covered the filibuster carve-out news before the holiday weekend. One other thing I'll note that I know that she might have brought up was the news. Where is this one? I have the headline here somewhere. Here we are. The one thing Biden is doing exceptionally well is the headline in Slate, the article by Mark Joseph Stern, and the subheader gives it all away. He is getting judges confirmed at a record pace, and his selections have been incredible. We really should read that in full at some point, but I'm sure that's something that Joan would have taken note of. Not to mention her latest story and fun headline, which I noticed and retweeted yesterday, details emerge on some of the grift behind Trump's months-long pre-election voter fraud claims. And that may bring us right back around to the interest in the January 6th committee in possibly referring criminal charges of wire fraud to federal prosecutors, I think. And I think that's what she's talking about here. But yeah, interesting piece. Loved the title. Had fun sharing it. And gosh, there was an awful lot here. Let's see. The past squatter in the Oval Office, she begins, spent months and months sowing seeds of distrust in our election system, trying to make sure that he had laid the groundwork to challenge the election or have an insurrection if the legal route to challenging it failed. He was open to anything, as were some of his well-heeled supporters. The Daily Beast has reports on the fundraising campaign that one of these groups, the Liberty Center for God and Country, that shouldn't even really be allowed as a name, ran ahead of the election, and what they did with that money ahead of the election. Remember that. Remember the former police captain who ran an innocent air conditioner technician off the road and held him at gunpoint, convinced that the man was transporting 750,000 fraudulent ballots? Right, and how we figured out that would have been impossible in a cargo van. Mark Aguirre, the former cop, was indicted last week, as you know, for aggravated assault in that attack. It was that attack and the subsequent criminal charges that outed the LCGC. which had paid Aguirre more than $200,000 to investigate voter fraud. No wonder he thought he had a legitimate job at this. Newly released documents show the depth of LCGC's planning and the money they raised to fight the election in the event of a Trump loss. All of this, by the way, undertaken before the election. How interesting. So that is a really remarkable angle on that. I didn't hear about this one, and I'd love to read more about it. You can read more about it right now. Well, right now if you go to Daily Kos and find the article, but you might have to wait for me to provide the link to Scott so he can write it up so that you can find it later. But you can, of course, find it in Joan's long list of entries over at Daily Kos, and you're welcome to do that. I'm going to turn around and read this thing again. I'll probably read it right after the show and throw it into the mix tomorrow. Tomorrow, of course, Wednesday, we welcome Greg back to the show. Turns out there's still a pandemic on. We'll figure out what's going on there. And some of the lessons learned from the pandemic. I saw him tweeting someone else's great article on that. Today, no doubt for inclusion tomorrow. What about right now? Well, you're staying tuned, of course, for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which comes up next.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Good news from the White House. Biden has issued a flurry of climate-related executive actions. And also in this program, some of America's most spectacular natural settings and historical icons are getting a makeover. Let's find out for better or for ill next.